Her clothes were torn. Not fashionably torn. Actually torn. The kind of torn that comes from living in a car. The kind of torn that comes from sleeping outside. The kind of torn that tells the story of someone who has fallen so far that the world doesn't even see them as human anymore. She was sitting at the bar in Murphy's Tavern on a Thursday night, and she was trying to nurse a coffee that she'd paid for with coins she'd found in the parking lot. The laughter started almost immediately. It was quiet at first. Then it got louder. A group of men, maybe 6 of them, maybe 7, were laughing at her. They were laughing at her torn clothes. They were laughing at the way she smelled. They were laughing at the fact that she was homeless and she had dared to walk into a bar like she belonged there. Her name was Sarah. She was 42 years old. She had been homeless for 2 years. 2 years ago, she had been working. She had been living in an apartment. She had been someone. And then her sister died. And the grief had consumed her. And she had lost her job. And she had lost her apartment. And she had lost everything. She had been on the streets for 2 years. 2 years of sleeping in her car. 2 years of using bathrooms in gas stations. 2 years of the world treating her like she didn't exist. 2 years of being invisible. And now she was being laughed at by 6 men who had never known what it felt like to lose everything. She was about to leave. She was about to take her coffee and walk back out into the night. But then someone stood up. His name was Marcus Webb. He was 57 years old. He was the president of the Sacramento chapter of the Hells Angels. He was 6 feet 4 inches tall. He had been in the club for 32 years. He had a reputation. He had scars. He had the bearing of someone who had experienced violence and had survived it. He stood up slowly. He didn't move quickly. He didn't make any sudden gestures. He just stood up and he looked at the 6 men who were laughing at Sarah. "Stop," he said. His voice wasn't loud. His voice was quiet. But the entire bar heard it. The entire bar went silent because they understood that Marcus Webb had just spoken, and when Marcus Webb spoke, people listened. "Stop laughing," Marcus said. "Right now. You're going to stop laughing at this woman. We're just having fun," one of the men said. His voice was weak. He understood, in that moment, that he had made a terrible mistake. "You're not having fun," Marcus said. "You're being cruel. There's a difference. You're laughing at someone who has lost everything. You're laughing at someone who is suffering. And I'm telling you that you're going to stop." He approached them slowly. He didn't threaten them. He didn't raise his fist. He just approached them, and he stood there. And the men understood that they had crossed a line. They understood that there was someone in this bar who was stronger than they were, and that someone did not believe that cruelty was acceptable. "Apologize," Marcus said. "What?" one of them asked. "Apologize to her," Marcus said. "You're going to turn around and you're going to tell her that you're sorry for laughing at her." The men hesitated. They looked at each other. They were trying to figure out if Marcus was serious. They were trying to figure out if they could refuse. Marcus didn't move. He just stood there. He was patient. He was waiting. One by one, the men turned to face Sarah. One by one, they apologized, not because they meant it, but because they understood that refusing would have consequences. They understood that Marcus Webb was not a man who could be ignored. "Now," Marcus said, "you're going to leave. You're going to get out of this bar. And you're never going to treat anyone like that again. Do you understand me?" They left. They didn't argue. They didn't fight. They just left. Because they understood that Marcus Webb had drawn a line, and they had crossed it, and now they had to live with the consequence. Marcus turned to Sarah. He approached her slowly. He sat down next to her at the bar. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that people can be that cruel." Sarah was crying. She was crying because someone had stood up for her. She was crying because someone had believed that she mattered. She was crying because the world had told her for 2 years that she was invisible, and now someone had proven that she wasn't. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah, I'm Marcus, and I want you to know something. Those men were wrong. Their cruelty says something about them. It doesn't say anything about you." He bought her dinner. He bought her coffee. He sat with her and he listened to her story. He listened to the story of how she had lost her sister and then lost everything else. He listened to the story of 2 years on the streets. He listened without judgment. He listened with the understanding that people were more than their circumstances. When the bar closed, Marcus offered to drive Sarah somewhere. She said she was staying in her car. Marcus said she was not staying in her car tonight. Marcus said she was coming to the clubhouse. She hesitated. She had been taught to be afraid of motorcycle clubs. She had been taught that men like Marcus were dangerous. But she understood, in that moment, that Marcus had just proven something different. Marcus had proven that strength could be used to protect, that power could be used to lift people up instead of pushing them down. She went to the clubhouse. It was not what she expected. It was warm. It was welcoming. It was filled with men who looked intimidating, but who treated her with respect. She was given a bed. She was given a shower. She was given clean clothes. She was given the first moment of safety she had experienced in 2 years. The next morning, Marcus talked to her. He talked about what came next. He talked about getting her into a transitional housing program. He talked about getting her into a job training program. He talked about getting her back on her feet. Sarah said she didn't know if she could do it. She said she had lost too much. She said she didn't know if she was strong enough. Marcus said something that would change Sarah's life. "Strength is not about never falling," Marcus said. "Strength is about getting back up. You've already done the hard part. You've already survived 2 years on the streets. You've already proven that you're strong. Now you just have to prove it to yourself." The motorcycle club became Sarah's family. They helped her get into a transitional housing program. They helped her get a job. They helped her rebuild. Within 1 year, Sarah was living in an apartment. Within 2 years, she was working full-time. Within 3 years, she was working and going to school. Sarah went back to school. She got her GED. She got into community college. She started studying social work. She wanted to help other homeless people. She wanted to do for them what Marcus had done for her. She wanted to remind them that they were human, that they mattered, that they deserved to be treated with respect. Marcus became her mentor. He became the person she came home to after classes. He became the person who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. He became her family. 15 years after the night in Murphy's Tavern, Sarah was a licensed social worker. She was working for a nonprofit that helped homeless people. She was the director of the organization. She was helping hundreds of people every year. She was doing for them what Marcus had done for her. The Hells Angels created a foundation in Marcus's name. It was dedicated to helping homeless women get back on their feet. Sarah ran the foundation. She used her own experience. She used her own story. She used the knowledge that everyone had value, that everyone mattered, that everyone deserved to be treated with respect. The Marcus Webb Foundation served 5,000 homeless women in its first 10 years. 5,000. All of them because one man had stood up in a bar and said that cruelty was not acceptable. All of them because one man had believed that Sarah mattered. When Sarah turned 57 years old, she did something special. She went back to Murphy's Tavern. She went back to the place where she had been laughed at. And she sat at the same bar. And she ordered the same coffee. And she thought about the night that changed her life. The bartender recognized her. He asked her if she was okay. Sarah said she was more than okay. She said she was there to remember the night that she understood that she mattered. The bartender brought her a drink on the house. He said that the man who had stood up for her had become a legend. He said that everyone in the city knew about Marcus Webb. He said that Marcus had changed the lives of thousands of people. Sarah smiled. She knew that was true. She had helped thousands herself. And it had all started because one man had decided that standing up for someone mattered more than staying silent. 20 years after Murphy's Tavern, Marcus Webb was 77 years old. He was still writing. He was still part of the club. And Sarah came to him with a proposal. She wanted to tell their story. She wanted to write a book. She wanted to share with the world what had happened. She wanted to show people that one moment of standing up could change everything. Marcus agreed. Sarah wrote a book. The book was called The Woman in Torn Clothes. It told the story of the night in Murphy's Tavern. It told the story of a woman who had lost everything. It told the story of a man who had stood up. It told the story of how one moment of courage had created a movement. The book was published. It sold hundreds of thousands of copies. It was taught in schools. It was used in training programs for social workers. It was used to teach people about empathy. It was used to teach people that homeless people were human, that they mattered, that they deserved to be treated with respect. But the real legacy was not the book. The real legacy was the Marcus Webb Foundation. The real legacy was the 5,000 women who had been helped. The real legacy was Sarah, a woman who had been homeless and had become a voice for the homeless. A woman who had been laughed at and had become an advocate. A woman who understood, because of one moment, that she mattered. When Marcus died at 84 years old, Sarah gave his eulogy. She stood in front of 500 people. She stood in front of 50 motorcycle club members. She stood in front of hundreds of homeless women who had been helped by his foundation. 25 years ago, Sarah said, I was sitting in a bar in torn clothes. I was homeless. I was invisible. I was the kind of person that the world had given up on. And then Marcus Webb stood up. He didn't do anything violent. He didn't fight. He just stood up and he said, "This is not acceptable." And that moment changed everything. She paused. She let the silence fill the room. Marcus taught me something that night. He taught me that strength is not about physical power. Strength is about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Strength is about seeing someone when the world is trying to make them invisible. Strength is about believing that every person matters. The silence was complete. It was the silence of people understanding that they had just lost someone who had changed their lives. The silence was the silence of respect. The silence was the silence of gratitude. Sarah lived to be 91 years old. She continued to run the Marcus Webb Foundation. She continued to help homeless women. She continued to do what Marcus had taught her. She stood up for people. She saw people when the world was trying to make them invisible. She believed that every person mattered, and every time she helped someone, every time she sat with a homeless woman, every time she stood up and said, "You matter," She remembered the night in Murphy's Tavern. She remembered the moment when someone had stood up for her. She remembered the man who had changed her life. Because that's what Marcus Webb had done. He had stood up. In a bar. For a woman in torn clothes, and he had silenced a room full of cruelty with the simple understanding that every person, every single person, deserved to be treated with respect. The silence in that bar after Marcus spoke was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of understanding. It was the silence of people comprehending that they had been wrong. That cruelty had consequences, that there were people in the world who would stand up and say, "Not here, not in my presence, not while I'm watching." And from that silence came movement. It came action. It came foundation work that would help thousands. It came a book that would be read by millions. It came change. It came justice. It came the understanding that one moment, one decision to stand up, could change everything. All because one woman in torn clothes walked into a bar. And one man decided that she mattered.